Hey guys, it's Sam, and welcome to Caps Lock, a podcast designed to help you live bigger, better, louder, and longer. Before we get started, I just want to thank you guys for listening and for giving this a chance and for coming here in pursuit of your best self. This is a space where we are going to grow together, and I hope that it helps you go forward confidently, unapologetically, and with purpose. It's time to live your life in Caps Lock. If that mission feels aligned for you, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. Today, we are going to talk about something that I can guarantee every single person listening has felt at least once in their life. And it is something that I have felt many times throughout my life. And it was just really on my heart this week. And I honestly think I needed to write this episode as much as I think some of you are going to need to hear it. So I'm feeling very purposeful today and very kind of aligned in the universe about it all. That thing is imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome is mainly considered within the framework of our careers, but it also creeps into various aspects of our lives, particularly our relationships, where we can't really name or identify it, or maybe we just choose not to. And I have found that when you don't name or identify a feeling, it becomes a lot bigger and scarier, and it feels more difficult to resolve. So, following our same kind of formula as usual, today I want to talk about what imposter syndrome actually is, who experiences it, why we experience it, how it impacts us, how to overcome it, what our lives could look like if we managed to overcome it. So let's do it. I want to start with a real life definition because, like I said, I think becoming really specific about what it is we're trying to tackle makes it so much more manageable. So, according to a journal published by the National Center for Biotechnology Information, imposter syndrome is a behavioral health phenomenon described as self-doubt of intellect, skills, or accomplishments among high-achieving individuals. I want to beat here and just say, I think it's so interesting that it mostly occurs amongst high-achieving individuals because the people who are like real bums are not experiencing this. It is mostly people who actually have recorded accomplishments in the world. That to me is really interesting because it suggests to me that if you're feeling this, you actually shouldn't be already baseline before you even get into it. This journal says these individuals cannot internalize their success and subsequently experience pervasive feelings of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and/or apprehension of being exposed as a fraud in their work, despite verifiable and objective evidence of their success. Despite outstanding academic and professional accomplishments, people who experience the imposter phenomenon persist in believing that they are really not bright and have fooled anyone who thinks otherwise. Numerous achievements, which one might expect to provide ample object evidence of superior intellectual functioning, do not appear to affect the imposter belief. So meaning like even if you have this imposter syndrome and then you achieve a million things, that doesn't make you feel better about it. Like it's kind of stuck. So it really, to me, suggests that doing the internal work on yourself is the only way to overcome it. And that's why we're here talking about it today. Now, the same journal with all of that information claims that the first people to actually identify and describe imposter syndrome in medical research were two doctors named Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose-Clance in 1978. Their study is particularly interesting to me because they researched exclusively women. And their reasoning for that was that they found the phenomenon was particularly prevalent and particularly intense in women, and significantly less frequent and less intense in men. Now, obviously, further research over the years has shown that people of all genders experience imposter syndrome, but to this day, it is widely agreed upon that women are more likely to experience it and feel it more intensely. When I found out that whole thing about women experiencing imposter syndrome more than men, it reminded me of this statistic that I've heard repeated a million times. So I went on the internet to find it so I can share it with you guys. It comes from an internal Hewlett-Packard report from like a decade ago. And Even though it's based more on observation than peer-reviewed study, it's been repeated so much because it just resonates with people so deeply. And the information reads, men apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women will only apply for the job if they meet 100% of them. Whether or not those numbers are actually accurate, it did strike a chord with me because I have definitely let self-doubt stop me before. And even when I don't let it fully stop me, it's always looming in the back of my mind at work, in relationships, just in life. I think in my work, the first time I really felt imposter syndrome is when I first left corporate America to work for myself. And that first sort of work that I did when I left my corporate job was consulting in the social media, like influencer content space. What's so funny to me about that is that I've been doing that type of work professionally since 2016. Obviously, there were way more prominent content creators out there at that time, but the truth is the majority of people who were looking at influencer content before 2016 were reading blogs. And only when Instagram started popping off in 2016 as a space for like very purposeful and deliberate content creation instead of just like a casual creative outlet, did those bloggers really start posting seriously on social media as part of their business. In 2016, I was a freshman in college, and it was toward the end of the school year, and I remember so clearly the first brand deal I did. I had never even heard of a discount code before, but this small sort of like homemade jewelry brand was making beaded bracelets, and they DM'd me offering to send me the bracelets for free if I posted a photo for them. So they gave me a discount code, and I shared it, and that way they were able to track exactly the number of sales that came in directly from my content. And it was a lot. A lot of people bought jewelry from that brand because of my post. And I literally just like kept getting free stuff from them. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the world. Like I'm getting free stuff. Like what an honor, what a gift. Like everyone's going to think I'm so cool. This is amazing. As time went on, literally for like several years, I continued to do posts for brands in exchange for product and sometimes like low sums of affiliate earnings. And when I say low sums, I am talking like 17 cents like commission on a sale for a product, culminating in like $75 checks at the end of a cycle. And eventually I did work my way up to earning real amounts of money, but the most valuable thing about that time in my life was not the money I earned or the products I got for free. It was that during those years, I absorbed an absurd amount of knowledge about building an audience and the importance of learning who they are and what they're seeking and creating content that provides value to them and scripting and filming and producing said content and interacting with them and negotiating brand deals. Like, I can't even explain or list the different things that I learned how to do during that time. In my free time, I was the consumer. In my influencer time, I was the creator. And then I had also gone on to work as an employee at a social media marketing agency and then at one of the top women's magazines in the world and at global media conglomerates. Like I had really been on every side of the industry doing work and research and really boots on the ground in like such a 360-degree way in that industry. I could answer any question about it, complete any assignment thrown my way. I could help brands realize their full potential. I could convert hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales. It was literally my life's work, and I knew it inside and out. But when I left corporate America and went out on my own, and it came time to charge brands for my expertise, I was completely paralyzed and consumed by self-doubt. I was terrified to charge people real money to share my knowledge with them and help them implement strategies that I had tried myself. They were proven and they were effective. And it's because I didn't believe that I was worth that kind of money and that I couldn't believe I was qualified. Eventually, I wound up saying fuck it because I just needed to make money. And so I actually started out by working with my previous employers first because I figured if I didn't believe in myself, like I knew these people believed in me. They had given me promotions, they had encouraged my growth, and they had supported me when I decided to go out on my own. So I started working with them, and not only did we just knock our projects out of the fucking park, but behind the scenes, I was also growing a retail business that did almost $1 million in sales, 96% of which came from social media marketing. I was offered a director level marketing role at a major media company at age 23 after I left corporate America. I left corporate America, was growing my retail business, was consulting for all these brands, and a media company came to me and said, "Hey, would you consider leaving what you're doing behind and working for us full time again? Like we know it's a tough sell to go back to working for someone else, but we really want you." And they offered me like a $250,000 salary at age 23 and a director level title. And guess what? I said no because I was making more money on my own and I was making more impact on my own and I had the freedom and flexibility on my own. All of these things are happening, proving to me, to myself, that I could do this. But the self-doubt never, not once, left my mind. Every time I had to pitch a new client, I second-guessed my rates. I talked myself out of negotiating for better rates, for higher rates. And I overworked myself going the extra mile for brands that were not paying me for extra assignments or extra time because I was so afraid that I wasn't worth the money they were spending on me, that I wasn't good enough or doing good enough work to be valuable to them, despite all of this evidence that I was building and collecting that I was so fucking good at this. Meanwhile, look at our government, right? Our president is a convicted felon and his cabinet is full of the types of men who plan wars and airstrikes in group chats. They believed they could, so they did. Maybe there's something we can learn from them after all, if they've got this kind of confidence in themselves, right? Anyway, I digress. Even if those numbers from the Hewlett-Packard report are not totally accurate, I do relate to the feeling of imposter syndrome. And more recent evidence from a meta-analysis of 108 studies with over 40,000 participants also confirmed that women are, in fact, more likely to feel imposter syndrome. Of course, beyond gender, there are several other social, cultural, and psychological factors that influence who experiences imposter syndrome more frequently and intensely. It is people in demanding careers like doctors, executives, academics. It is perfectionists. It is people from marginalized communities. It is people who are first generation to go to college or to enter a certain field. It can be neurodivergents or people who struggle with their mental health. It can be entrepreneurs. It's people who work in creative fields. All of these people are scientifically more likely to experience imposter syndrome. And I want to go deeper on why, because that's a lot of us. I think a lot of us fit into one or even more of those categories. And it's influenced by a combination of mainly psychological factors. And I've always found that if we know why something is happening, it is much easier to identify strategies for overcoming it or even prevent it from happening in the first place. So I've got like 10 reasons here why we might feel imposter syndrome, and so many of them have applied to me at different times in my life, and some of them have even applied all at once. So I'm really going to be interested to see if any of them resonate with you guys. Let me know in the comments on, where, I don't know where you are, on Spotify, on social media, send me a DM. Let me know if any of this resonates with you guys, because for me, it just felt like totally inescapable once I started looking into this. So one reason why we might feel imposter syndrome is because we believe that the stakes are incredibly high. When you're in a high stakes situation, for example, like maybe someone paid you a lot of money to do a project, or something major relies on you completing a specific task or assignment, you might feel a lot of pressure to perform your best. And when you perceive your best as being the only option, the risk of getting it wrong feels so huge and so scary, and you might be less confident in your ability to succeed. But then when the stakes are low and you're in a more relaxed environment, you might be able to complete the same exact task without worrying at all. Another reason we might feel imposter syndrome is because you feel like you don't belong or you don't fit in. Maybe you're a woman in a male-dominated field like finance or you guys, I forgot I wrote this in my outline. I wrote, maybe you're a woman in a male-dominated field like finance or gaslighting. What the fuck was I doing when I wrote this? Okay, but I kind of hate with that though, right? Maybe you're a woman in a male-dominated field like gaslighting. Okay, mental reset. I think I'm gonna leave that in. No, fuck it. Maybe, okay, let's think of some other examples. Maybe you are the youngest or oldest person on your team. Maybe you're on a need-based scholarship at an expensive private school, right? None of those facts mean that you are less capable of doing what you came there to do. But when you feel like you're out of place or in a position when you're getting unwanted attention, you might feel like you don't deserve to be there or like someone else who does fit in with the mainstream would be a better candidate. I want you to think of it this way. If whatever difference you're worried about means anything at all, it probably means that you're more qualified because you broke the mold and they diverted from what they normally do to include you. That's what we call a reframe, ladies and gentlemen and gaslighters. Another reason you might feel like you are experiencing imposter syndrome is because you're a perfectionist. And this is like, I see this all the time. It applies to me all the time. If you believe the only way to succeed is to get it 100% perfect, you will always feel like a failure. There is almost no person on this earth who does anything 100% perfect, let alone everything. Plus, if you're a perfectionist, your own standards for doing a good job are likely way higher than someone else's. And while they might think you did an incredible job, you might still be disappointed because your bar is just unreasonably high. And to that point, many perfectionists are constantly moving said bar. So maybe you do achieve something, but you're so quick to choose a new higher goal that you never get a sense of accomplishment from the first one. Another reason you might feel imposter syndrome is the one that appears in every single episode. So I'll say it louder for the people in the back. You're afraid of failure or judgment. In the same vein as my point about perfectionism, people who are terrified of failure or of judgment are more likely to feel imposter syndrome because they find it easier to internalize failure than success. When you internalize something, it means you not only apply it to the situation at hand, but you also apply it to your identity. So a student who internalizes failure, for example, doesn't believe that she just like blew the math test. She believes she's an idiot. She believes she's stupid. But a lot of perfectionists, since they're in pursuit of these lofty goals and are always raising the bar, making it harder and harder to achieve said goals, they never internalize their accomplishments because they're so focused on fixing or eliminating their shortcomings. So they don't feel like they actually deserve anything they've achieved because they identify more with their failures than their successes. This one was really interesting to me and a great point. If you are experiencing imposter syndrome, it might be because you are masking. You have masking behaviors. An inherent component of imposter syndrome is feeling like a fraud or like you've fooled everyone into thinking you're something that you're not, whether that's successful or smart or deserving or whatever it is. And something that can make you feel like a complete fraud is a masking behavior, like forcing yourself to be quiet and reserved when you're like an ADD queen who needs to, feel seen and heard and, gab and laugh. I have been in this position many times where I'm doing something that feels so unnatural just to like fit in or, be polite or appear agreeable or pleasant for someone else's comfort. And there's nothing that makes you feel as fake and fraudulent as acting like someone you're not. Maybe you experience imposter syndrome because your field of work is subjective, right? If you're in a creative field like, say, art, as opposed to something that's super black and white like accounting, your work is so much more subjective because there's not a cut and dry list of criteria that you need to meet in order to be considered successful. So it can be hard to judge where you fall. Like, you ask yourself constantly, like, am I doing it? Like, did I get there? Have I succeeded? We naturally will undersell ourselves or downplay our accomplishments, especially women. And so without any sort of rubric or guideline to measure up against, you might feel like you've tricked someone into thinking your art is good or like your skill is a soft one, so it's worth less than a hard one. But that's not actually the case. Another reason you might feel imposter syndrome is because you are constantly comparing yourself to other people. This is something that we all experience mainly because the internet gives us access to each other in a way that we literally couldn't even have imagined 15 years ago. However, social media in particular are a breeding ground for comparison because you're looking at the best, most meticulously curated and filtered and edited moments of someone else's life, and you're comparing them to like the worst thing that happened to you today, right? Comparing the best moment of someone else's life to the worst moment of yours is just always going to make you feel like you come up short. And as a result, you might feel like you aren't good enough. This one, I think, is kind of one of those deep, nuanced, layered ones that a lot of us experience. You were raised in an environment that emphasized achievement-based validation. I definitely grew up in a family of high achievers, and it was never competitive because what's so interesting about my family is that we all are interested in and work in different fields. And in my family, we were always validated for things besides our accomplishments. But there was definitely a lot, almost like a disproportionate amount of positive reinforcement for achievement in school and in sports and in work. But even outside of your family, I think everyone who is raised in normal society is just conditioned to pursue conventional, measurable achievements like making honor roll, winning a championship game, getting a raise or a promotion at work. It's very common for those things to be more rewarded than other things that are maybe harder to measure. So if all of your self-worth and validation come from those measurable achievements, you're likely to get stuck in a rat race of pursuing one achievement after another in an effort to fulfill your self-worth when maybe it's better to derive your self-worth from other things. This is where I want to talk about kind of how imposter syndrome can also get into like kind of seep into your personal relationships, and it's not always just about work. You might feel imposter syndrome if you have an anxious attachment style. I have a super anxious attachment style, which if you've been listening since the first episode of this podcast, you know I got from a very fucked up boyfriend in college who constantly told me like I wasn't enough and always made me feel like I was never going to earn his love. If you are like me, you always feel like you're doing things and like trying new strategies and like techniques to make people love you because you're so afraid of being abandoned. It's really cool and fun, in case you were wondering. As a result of this complex, you might feel like you're not inherently worth loving or worthy of attention and time and energy and love, and that the person you're with is only with you because you've tricked or manipulated them into thinking that you're worthy, which is 1,000% in my mind a form of imposter syndrome that honestly just doesn't get talked enough because it's so overshadowed by the workplace version of it. But I think that's a real thing, and I think it goes hand in hand with anxious attachment styles. Now, the last one I want to talk about is if you experience imposter syndrome, it might be because you have a tendency to catastrophize. When you catastrophize, you are expecting the absolute worst case scenario to come true. And that is just a recipe and for like kind of feeding into this vicious cycle of imposter syndrome catastrophizing. Because the truth is, none of us are prepared for your worst case scenario. I'm a major catastrophizer, and if you're wondering whether this is something you do, like if what you do qualifies as catastrophizing, this is what it's actually like, right? So when I first started this podcast, you might remember from earlier episodes, I was stressed out because it wasn't making any money yet. And I was like, this is my full-time job. Like, I got to pay the bills, right? It is expensive and time-consuming to make a podcast. It wasn't earning any money. And most people would be like, okay, cool, that's stressful. But, you know, I prepared for this. I didn't just like start a business out of nowhere with like no savings, right? Based on my expenses, say I have like 6 months of runway before I really have to like throw in the towel. And probably in those next 6 months, I can make some money, which will extend my runway by, say, 3 more months, which gives me 3 more months to get enough money to extend my runway by, say, a couple more months, and so on, right? That's like my boyfriend's perspective on entrepreneurship and making your business profitable. That's like what a normal person would say. Be like, okay, this is stressful, but like I have some money set aside. I'll be able to survive. And, you know, I basically have 6 months to make another however many dollars to keep this project going until I'm truly out of money. Okay, now I'm going to tell you what my brain thinks. This is how I catastrophize. Here's how I thought. I thought, okay, I have 6 months of runway before this business is officially a failure, because in 6 months, I will run out of money. And when that 6-month mark arrives, I will be publicly humiliated by having failed at a project that I was very confident in and outspoken about. And then I will default on my mortgage payments and I will become homeless because I don't have enough money to pay my bills. And then I'll go into debt, and then my family will be shamed by my failure, and my boyfriend will think I'm a mess and leave me. And then nobody will love me and I'll be alone in the world with nothing to my name. Right. Okay. I wish I was kidding, but that is literally how my brain plays out every scenario. And in case you were wondering, it's a terrible way to live because I constantly feel like I am like cheating in some game where like I have this horrible, inevitable ending coming for me. Every dollar I earn, I feel like I've found some kind of like loophole, and, the end is near, but I'm just buying a little extra time before I crash and burn because I'm incapable of, doing this thing and making it actually work and, exceeding my wildest dreams, right? Mind you, this is my 4th business that I've run. And the 3 that I ran before this were incredibly profitable and successful. They literally bought me an apartment in Manhattan at age 26, right? There is proof and evidence that I am and can be a successful entrepreneur, but somehow I still can't shake this feeling that I'm not capable of doing this and that I will fail in some like spectacular way, and I will finally be exposed and ridiculed for the fraud that I like inherently believe that I am. So if you are feeling imposter syndrome, maybe you're catastrophizing, right? If you go to these like horrible extreme lengths to prove to yourself that you're incapable of doing this, I urge you to just acknowledge that and sit with it for a second, because I think a lot of times we don't even realize that that is so dramatic. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us can relate to a lot of these reasons, and they all work together to give us the imposter syndrome that we suffer it from day in and day out. And the reason it's so important to resolve this feeling is because it impacts us so much in our day-to-day, sometimes in ways that we don't even realize are related to imposter syndrome, right? If you suffer from imposter syndrome, you might manifest poor performance. When we're insecure in our abilities, we do not perform our best. That's just how it goes. We are more risk averse because we're so sure we're going to fail. But Wayne Gretzky said it best: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So that could lead to you never fulfilling your true potential. We're on a never-ending loop of anxiety because we feel like someone's going to discover that our value is just a facade. We're chronically disappointed because we never meet our own impossible standards. We have trouble accepting praise or recognition because we feel like we don't deserve it. We overwork ourselves to overdeliver so we don't disappoint anyone. We have self-loathing because, we feel like frauds and we feel like fakes. And the thing that underpins all of it is that people with imposter syndrome do not trust themselves. They do not believe in themselves. They have trouble being proud of themselves, and they struggle to love themselves. And the whole point of this whole podcast is to help you discover yourself and understand yourself and work on yourself and love yourself, because if you can love yourself and believe in yourself, you can do anything. And that's why it comes up so much in every episode. I'm not just hawking a cliche at you because it sounds pretty. Most of you know by now that I'd rather the process be ugly and messy and actually get the results I want, rather than saying something that sounds nice but doesn't move the needle. If you are able to believe in yourself, you have all the tools you need to fulfill your potential, to feel fulfilled in your life, and to do whatever you set your mind to. So we need to overcome the imposter syndrome because you cannot live your life not believing in yourself. So I want to explore all the different ways that are not bullshit to overcome your imposter syndrome. And all of these are tried and true either by myself or by someone I trust based on my relationship to them or based on their credentials. So I really believe in these strategies. I think they're super practical and effective and like not eye roll, huff and puff like this is stupid. So let's talk overcoming imposter syndrome. The first thing I want you to do is reframe your thoughts. Like I said earlier, if you're the only one of your kind in a space, it's probably not because you don't belong. It's because you broke the mold. Why would they hire someone different who wasn't a good fit? If anything, they'd hire someone different because they're a better fit or because they bring something to the table that nobody else can offer. Another one I hear a lot is when you accomplish something, women are so guilty of this. They say, oh, thanks, I got lucky. You didn't get lucky. You were prepared when the opportunity presented itself. I want to double click on that particular one. These two perspectives, right? I got lucky and I was prepared. They share the same central truth, which is that you achieved something. But the first framework suggests that you didn't earn your achievement, but that it happened to you passively by chance. The second framework suggests that you laid the groundwork so that if an opportunity arose, you would be able to capitalize on it, which puts the power and the control back into your hands and emphasizes the work you put in to do so. Number 2, overcoming imposter syndrome. Keep a log of your wins. This is actually so fun and it works like an absolute charm. I write the tiniest shit in here. This is kind of like my gratitude journal from previous episodes, which was hilarious, where I literally wrote that I was feeling grateful that I lived close to an ATM, so I didn't have to pay ATM fees. Like, okay, Sam. But I swear to God, it works. A win is a win. They literally make me smile all the time when I look back on them. So I actually wrote down, I inserted into this episode my list from this past week. One day I wrote that I made it to the gym by 7:30 a.m. I confirmed a guest for the podcast who I had on a vision board a couple months ago. Here I just have a screenshot of a text from my mentor that was like really nice and complimentary. I got 3 weeks ahead on recording episodes for the podcast so I could take the weekend off to actually enjoy my time at a wedding I was going to. I shot a better score on my second round of golf than my first round of golf by 4 strokes, but like I said, a win is a win. I crossed a task off my to-do list that I've been procrastinating on for a month. I crushed a call with a potential advertiser for the pod, and I closed 2 brand deals last week. Now, obviously, not all of these wins are work-related, but they are all accomplishments that I prepared for and that I worked for. And some of the wins came by chance, right? Like that text from my mentor, that came out of nowhere, but I earned it, right? These achievements are the direct result of my hard work. Not only does this remind me that none of my accomplishments are luck or accidents or by chance, but it also reminds me of how many more wins there are than losses, because that is 7 wins that I just rattled off in 1 week. And that feels so huge because even the small wins add up to big ones, right? And to be honest, by the end of the week, like I don't even remember all the different insecurities and struggles I experienced, but writing down and reading through my wins gives me the confidence and self-assuredness that I am capable of doing things and seals the wins into my memory so that they are my primary focus. And what you water grows. Number 3, instead of imagining the worst possible outcome, I want you to imagine the best possible outcome. We spend so much time worrying about what the worst case scenario looks like that we can literally sometimes visualize it happening to us. And this is no bueno because visualization is so closely linked to manifestation. And this whole section here is by no means groundbreaking or the first time you'll have heard this, but anytime you feel yourself starting to spiral about what could happen in a worst case scenario, we're just going to flip the script. Instead of what if the worst scenario comes true, I want you to ask yourself, what if the best case scenario comes true? What if you achieve it, accomplishment, beat it, win it, finish it? Visualize that instead. Imagine what you're wearing, what you're doing, who else is there, where literally physically, what room are you in? Visualization is so powerful. So why would you repeatedly visualize the worst thing that could happen to you instead of the best? Bonus points here again if you write it down. There is so much evidence that you are more likely to achieve a goal if you write it down. And I also find that you can be more descriptive and more meticulous about every single tiny detail, and writing it down just makes it feel more real, more concrete, more possible. Now, this next one, number 4, is going to surprise you because it's going to be very counterintuitive and conflict with the previous thing I said, which is I want you to think about the worst case scenario, but actually rationalize it. Oftentimes, when we do our worst case scenario spiral, we go to extremes that are completely unrealistic. For example, my fear spiral from earlier, where I literally said I was going to be homeless and my family was going to abandon me. Like, that's literally insane, right? So I tried to create a realistic worst case scenario. If I run out of money to make the podcast, I will probably have to hustle to rebuild my client roster at my marketing agency, which I've downsized because I wanted to devote my full attention to the podcast. So what do I have to do to achieve that, right? I'll have to do some networking, maybe some cold emailing. I'll gather case studies from my work history to make a compelling pitch. I'll have to reduce my spending, maybe put my renovations on my apartment on hold until I've earned enough money to cover it on top of my living expenses. That is a much more realistic worst case scenario for me in the context of my podcast. And I'll say what you're probably thinking because that's the whole point. It's not that fucking bad, right? By creating a realistic version of your worst case scenario, you start to realize that you've been catastrophizing all along. And it's usually not dire straits the way you think it is because you're not insane, right? Like when you start a new business, you put aside a couple $1,000s of savings. That's what you do. You have an emergency fund or you have a contingency plan. I think doing this exercise kind of shrinks your fear from this big life-altering thing to something that's much more manageable, and it makes you less scared of the outcome. Number 5, this is something that women need to do, full stop, period. I don't care who you are. This applies to every single one of us. We're going to learn to accept praise and recognition and compliments. The key here is to not minimize or blow off the compliment, but also to hear it and accept it and acknowledge it. My favorite way to do this is by saying thank you, but then following up your thank you by acknowledging how that particular compliment made you feel. For example, a friend of mine recently reached out to tell me that they liked an episode of the podcast that I was not super proud of. It didn't meet my personal standards. I felt like maybe it wasn't as deep a dive as I could have done. It felt a little bit rushed, a little bit sloppy. So my instinct was to blow off this compliment by being like, oh, thank you. I didn't feel like it was my best work, but thanks. I'm really glad you liked it. That makes me feel better. No, that completely discounts the compliment, which, by the way, makes that person feel like their compliment meant nothing to you, which is not a good feeling to give somebody. But it also reinforces for you that your work is not deserving of praise. So instead, I said thank you. And then I said something along the lines of I really value your opinion and it means the world to me that you liked this episode. And honestly, that gave me the boost of confidence I needed to start to work on the next one, right? Verbalizing the positive emotions that come up in response to praise helps you identify and internalize the positive feelings associated with that compliment instead of internalizing the feeling of, I didn't earn that. It was just luck or it was just chance or, you know what, it actually wasn't that good, but that was nice of you to say. Because then you're going to internalize that they didn't really mean what they're saying to you. And that person did. That's not fair to them and it's not fair to you. Sort of in the same section, I want to emphasize the importance of not only accepting the compliments and logging your wins and all that, but also celebrating them. If you set aside a specific amount of time to maybe you treat yourself to a little coffee. Maybe it's your sugar coffee instead of your health coffee, right? Maybe you go out to a celebratory dinner with your partner or your team or whoever. Maybe you give yourself a day off because you earned it, right? Think about how powerful it would be if we take the time that we spend worrying and, shaming ourselves and discounting our achievements. What if you spent that time celebrating your wins? Think of all of the time we would be dedicating to positive reinforcement. So I want you to actually go out and set aside time when you are planning to acknowledge and celebrate your wins. That is that can really change your whole life. Number 6 sounds like a cliche, but I'm going to maybe blow your mind. I don't know. I want you to feel the fear and do it anyway. The truth is there are going to be times when you can't help but be nervous or intimidated by something. A challenging assignment or, whatever it is. If you just do it, you win whether you succeed or you fail. Hear me out. Say there's a job you really want and you meet 75% of the qualifications. A lot of people, women in particular, are going to look at that and they're going to hesitate. But you're going to apply for the job anyway. And if you get an interview or even get the job, then great, congratulations. You've just proven to yourself that you can do hard things. But if you never hear back or you get a rejection email, great again, because you just did something intimidating and you failed and you fucking survived. Congratulations, you have just proven to yourself that you can do hard things. Number 7, show up as your highest self. And if you can't find who that person is, show up as someone fucking else. If you're having trouble believing in yourself, I want you to think of something you do believe in. For me, it's my girl, Mel Robbins. Do I think Mel could handle this task? Like, duh. I think Mel Robbins can do anything. And literally the other day, she just tweeted that she has no idea what the fuck she's doing either. But I still believe in her. So if I don't think I can do something, I think about how Mel Robbins would do it. Something about distancing yourself from the task just makes it so much clearer to see what steps you can take to tackle it. For example, when I'm trying to improve the podcast, I don't think of it as my podcast. I think of it as my friend Jackie's podcast. I will literally look at the product and look at our distribution channels and be like, what advice would I give Jackie to make her podcast pop off? Like, what could Jackie do better here? And suddenly, I have a list of 25 bullet points of things that would improve my product and bring more value to my audience. When you're thinking about yourself, it is so easy to make excuses about why you can't do something. Oh, I'm not qualified. Oh, I'm so busy. I don't have time. Someone else would be so much better at this. Oh, I can't afford that. But when you take yourself out of the equation, the thought process becomes, Jackie should really add intro music to her podcast. And honestly, you don't know Jackie's financial situation. You don't know how much time Jackie has. So you're like, Jackie should just fucking do it, right? But now I'm Jackie. And suddenly I feel like I don't really have a good excuse for why I can't improve my podcast anymore. So basically, the joke of this, right, the punchline is, this hack for dumping imposter syndrome is the opposite of all the other hacks. Don't be yourself. Be Jackie. Be fucking Mel Robbins. And show up as that person over and over and over again until you become them. Number 8, I want you to distinguish between your feelings and facts. When you are feeling imposter syndrome, there's a major distinction you should be making. You're just not doing it. You are taking everything you feel as Bible, and that's literally insane. Say I get asked, through my agency to organize a huge influencer marketing project for a car brand. I don't know, that's just a random example. And I feel nervous and hesitant about it. And my rationale is I know nothing about cars. I can't do this project. Cool. Well, the project isn't to build a fucking car. Right? The project is to sell a car. Have I sold things before? Yeah. The project is to market a car. Have I marketed things before? Yeah. The project is to organize an influencer campaign. Have I organized an influencer campaign before? Yeah. And have I gotten positive feedback from brands on my work? Yeah, I have. So fuck a pro-con list. I make a feelings versus facts list. In the feelings side, I write down my emotions. I'm nervous. I'm hesitant. I'm insecure. I'm unsure. I don't know if I can do this. Then on the fact side, I write down all the evidence I've gathered throughout my entire career that I'm actually able to do it, the facts. You never cite Wikipedia as a source for a research paper, right? Because anyone at any time can go in and change it. And, it's based on random shit and it's not a reliable source. Instead, you would go to a peer-reviewed study, in an esteemed medical journal aggregator. And, you'd find facts that are supported by research and evidence. So why on earth would you rely on your feelings, which constantly change and are influenced by things like how much sleep you got and whether a friend was being kind of quiet at dinner the other day, and does that sweater look good on you? Is it really your color? And what your hormones are up to today, right? That's what influences your feelings instead of the facts, which are unchanging and proven and reinforced by historical behavior and data and evidence, right? Logically, you would never pick your feelings over that evidence. So just a thought. The bottom line is, I want you to envision a world in which you are qualified and deserving of all your achievements. Statistically, it is unlikely that you would have achieved all of the things that you've achieved in your life by chance. Because why you? It's kind of a morbid perspective, but I always feel this way. None of us are really that special. We're all just here trying to do the same thing, trying to survive the day, trying to make the most of our time on this flying rock. And we're probably a speck in some other universe, right? So the truth is, none of us are chosen. None of us are especially different or blessed. The only difference is between people who do it and people who don't. And the people who do it 99% of the time are the people who believe in themselves. So creating a world in which you feel like you can trust yourself, like you can believe in yourself, is really the only thing in between you and doing what you want to do. So That's it. That's my final thoughts on the matter. I hope today you learned something or reflected on something, or it just gives you like the kick in the ass that you need to like really do the work on yourself. Because I think so often we talk about, oh, I'm working on myself. I'm really invested in my personal growth. But what are you doing? Are you doing exercises? Are you sitting down with your journal and figuring out like where you feel like you could make improvements in your life? Or are you just like doing self-care and like spending time alone? Those things are valuable, but unless you're actually challenging yourself to think differently or adopt a new approach or perspective, you're not really doing the work. So that's kind of what this episode is about. That's what I want you guys to be reflecting on. That's what I'm reflecting on, and it makes a really big difference for me. And if you do nothing else, try to do the wins log. That is something that I have personally tried. It makes me happy every day. I just add it right onto the gratitude journal because it's like a really good, they're kind of in the same vein. They are in the same mindset. And it's made a really big difference in my attitude when I approach things. So hope you learned something. Share this episode with a friend if you liked it or if you know anyone who is underselling themselves. I'm personally texting this to about 25 of my friends literally as soon as I finish editing it. And that's that on that. Thank you guys again from the bottom of my heart for giving Caps Lock a chance. If you liked this episode, please stick around for more because we have some really exciting topics on the docket, including, this is fun. I talked to some run coaches last week, and they are going to tell us all about the foundations of running for beginners. If you follow me on social, you know I went on my first run ever a couple of weeks ago, so it was really great for me. I'm bringing a dating expert on to talk about dating in 2025. I'm bringing someone on to talk about protein powder. We'll talk about how to make a good first impression, friend breakups, manifestation, and so much more. Some will be solo episodes and some will feature scientists, founders, experts, doctors, and other just very cool, smart people. If there's a topic you want to hear about on Caps Lock, send me a message. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at Life in Caps Lock. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Leave me a rating or review. These are super important to podcasters. And tune in next Sunday at 8 a.m. for another episode of Caps Lock. Okay. Love you guys. Talk soon.